All right, well, we're going to call to order the work session for the Cochise County Board of Supervisors. Today's Friday, the 18th of April. We're meeting at the Board of Supervisors hearing room in Melody Lane. Pursuant to ARS 38431.02H, the public will have access to the meeting room 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. Members of the Board of Supervisors will attend either in person by Microsoft Teams. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams or computer or mobile app. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comments will not be taken. We'll begin with the roll call. District 1.
Crosby is here.
District 2, Ms. Gomez is meeting with officials from the Transportation Board and Douglas regarding the Port of Entry stuff, which is important, so she was not able to make it to this meeting. She had another important meeting to go to. And then District 3, Antonori is here. So Mr. Crosby and Antonori are present. Ms. Gomez is absent for good cause. All right, we will then go straight to Ms. Gilman to kick this off, and I know you'll just...
I'll just hand it over, but I'll say my piece. So today we're talking about Public Works. This is the second session on Public Works. We had the HERF funds separated out, and today we're going to talk about solid waste and fleet. So I know Supervisor Antonori has a lot of questions about fleet charges, so we hope to address those as well. So we'll hand it over to Jason.
All right. Well, my name is Jason Fazio. I'm the Public Works Director for Cochise County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Sharon, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess we're here to talk about another one of our special revenues. We're going to start with solid waste. We'll dive right into this. We'll talk about the revenues just a little bit. If there's at any point in time anybody decides they need a little more information when I go through this, Joe and I would be happy to meet with you individually to go over any specific information or whatever that wasn't captured here or something that comes up later.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
Because it is a lot to go over.
Yeah.
We're going to be going over those three divisions. All right. So we'll start with revenues. We have landfill closure at $3.32 million. Solid waste landfill development at 2.012.
So how is closure generating 3.327 million? What does that mean? Closing a landfill, you make money closing a landfill?
So this is one of those statutes that we have to put money away so that we can care for the landfills indefinitely. So there's a certain amount of money. There's basically they do a study to decide how much money should be put away annually to make sure that we have enough money to maintain the landfill once it's closed. So this closure fund would contribute. This fund.
Okay, so that's a fund. Landfill closure is fund.
We actually have different
So
funds.
you tap that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we call these revenues because money comes out of our solid waste operations, any of our tipping fees and everything else, monies we get from the state or the half cent or anything. We have to contribute so much into those lines by statute. So landfill closure is a statute that we have to do. Solid waste landfill development, the $2 million, that's so that we can dig future cells. Okay. And then the waste tire is a separate fund because that's money that we get from the state to run our waste tire program.
And that comes from the $5 a tire
Yes.
tax that's on old tires?
Yes. And then the solid waste operations, that's $6.892 million right there. That's fees that are generated at the scale. Typically, there is a little bit of half-cent sales tax in that money. Also, there's money that's generated or revenue that's generated from us hauling material to Tucson, metal, and recyclables that generate revenue. We do cardboard too a little bit. It's not.
Yeah, I was surprised that you said make money on cardboard. I couldn't believe that.
So our cardboard, what's interesting about that is if somebody will take it, even if we're not really making any money off of it, we are technically making money because we're in the business of selling airspace.
You have transport.
Yeah, and so we're not transporting it, and if we don't put it in our landfill, we're saving that airspace for trash that we're going to charge $64 a ton for later. So if we save that airspace, basically we're saving money or generating money at that point.
I know this isn't related to budget. I'm just my brain is. There's a lot of this now alternative energy that's being done through burning of solid waste to generate energy. I mean, I was talking to the Union Pacific guys, and they were telling me how much money they make selling these old railroad ties because they actually burn them in a facility that generates electricity, and you can't buy them anymore from Union Pacific because they got this contract to give all the railroad ties to this company in Texas that turns them into electricity.
Mhm.
And so, and obviously railroad ties wood, and so there's a higher efficiency there than cardboard. I mean, but did we ever look at something like that to create space, find a customer that, or maybe encourage a G&T cooperative entity to maybe go into some other kind of alternative fuel instead of burning coal or burning.
So contractors have approached solid waste in the past, and we've done research in the past about using that material for something like that.
Yeah.
Typically, landfills that produce somewhere around the neighborhood of 300,000 to 400,000 tons will get approached by different companies if it makes sense logistically
We just
for
don't have
trucking
that.
costs.
Okay.
We're too far away, and our maximum tonnage we've ever done in a year is probably like 83,000 tons. So we're a long ways from that 300,000 ton mark
To keep the
feed
the furnace burning
Yeah.
to turn the turbines, which is
Yeah.
not enough. Okay.
Yeah, you have to be able to constantly feed that.
Yeah,
beast.
I got you. That's why I was just wondering. I guess the railroad, I don't know so many railroad ties they go through.
Yeah.
Right? So that was just, man, that would be great. The garbage, if you can burn garbage.
So we take in 82,000 tons a year, roughly 80,000. Then we haul 2,000 to 5,000 tons of steel to Tucson. So that reduces the amount that goes in the landfill. Then we reduce it again by hauling 2,000 tons of cardboard or whatever it is out of
How
there.
about aluminum? You don't do aluminum?
We do.
Oh, you
So
do?
anything that basically anything that would generate revenue, we do that to reduce the tipping fee or keep the tipping fee stable. Okay, so anything that can generate money, we will do it. And
Gotcha.
like I said, it doesn't have to generate a lot. If somebody was to take the cardboard, let's say, it dropped to $1 a ton, we could still sell it because we wouldn't be putting it in the landfill. So even though it appears we're not really making any money, we would be generating revenue in a
Because
way.
you got space to charge somebody to dump other stuff. in the
Exactly.
garbage.
We can resell the airspace at 64 ton a second time. Maybe even a third time if the cardboard keeps leaving, the airspace stays the same.
Because they still have to pay for dropping off cardboard
Yep,
and metal. It's
everything.
Still the same fee
Yep.
as the trash.
Per
So they-
ton, same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everybody's paying the 64 a ton to get rid of all the materials. And then we take that material up to Tucson and sell
Do you
it.
have a sorting facility that sorts all this stuff?
We used to. The sorting facility was actually costing us more revenue than if we just basically pack out our cans. And we do.
You got like a
To an
big magnet
extent.
thingy that just goes over the garbage and pulls all the metal out? Or?
Yeah, so we use an excavator with a thumb. And typically what we'll do is we'll pack out our roll-off cans with the metal. Now that metal gets aluminum tied into it once in a while, but Robert, our superintendent in solid waste, he has the guys with what they call a Gaylord box. And at our transfer stations, the guys will put like copper wire in one Gaylord, and they'll put aluminum in another Gaylord, and they separate all of these different materials so that the sorting's actually happening right there on the site. And then we call those precious metals, and those get sent up on a separate flatbed every quarter. We actually have an incentive program that we have in solid waste where there's a little bit of the revenue that goes back to the employee, and that's to incentivize them to pull that aluminum and cardboard and steel out of the waste stream, get it into these Gaylords, and then we go out and
You
sell
give them a
this
piece
stuff.
of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And again, it's an enterprise fund, so it's a business within the government. So it's a really fun and challenging process, and we find a lot of value in making sure that we're doing the best we can for the residents of the county to make sure we keep that tipping fee down, and we're saving as much airspace as possible, and we're just good stewards of the land. I think we're ready for the second
Yeah,
slide.
yeah.
This portion of the budget starts on page 7. Let's see.
Okay, so here we'll talk a little bit about expenses. Our landfill closure, this 500,000 that you see here, this is something that Stacy and I talked about a little bit at our previous meeting that we had about budget. I'm not really familiar with what the 500,000 is. I can tell you there's a very small portion of this that goes into methane and water testing, but this is a liability calculation that, from what I understand, state auditors set for us, and finance, they work together to figure out what that is. And so that liability calculation is done through the auditor and finance and we have a contingency in that, but this closure is, again, a statute thing that we have to do. It's
And the
mandated.
Eastern Regional.
Who does get paid to?
That's the closure.
Eastern Regional Landfill Closure
That
Fund?
was our previous landfill. So that was a landfill that the county had that has closed. And now we have to pay a liability fee according to the auditors
Right.
for that closure.
Again, it kind of goes back to us having to maintain a landfill forever. Once you own a landfill, you're married to it. You're going to maintain that forever, and that's why that closure and all those things are in there. And they're mandated. By all right, they should be. So we're making sure that we have the funds to cover any kind of, testing or any kind of issues that may come up with, like a liner tearing or something, and now all of a sudden we're contaminating groundwater, whatever. So the solid waste landfill development, you see the building and grounds right there, the 100,000, and professional services, 100,000. Typically what we use that money for is our transfer stations. So we've got these transfer stations out and around the county, and we contract with them. Currently, we're using we're using our professional services line in Douglas to get the building reskinned. We've talked about it at some of the work sessions. And things like that. So basically, that's just money we kind of hold at $200,000 a year to maintain those stations. It seems to be a pretty good amount. Robert does a real good job keeping the pumps running and keeping the buildings looking fairly decent with that amount. And most of that gets contracted out. Facilities recently hit us up, and they're going to be starting to do some of that stuff. We may have to buy the materials, but they're going to provide some of the labor to do some of that stuff. So hopefully we can move in that direction. It may save solid waste a little more money. Going on to the waste tire professional services. So right here, we have a contractor, and the state's actually contracted with CRM, and that's Crum Rubber. It's in Phoenix. And we do a transfer out for $120,000 to operating expenses. And what this is for, and so the state money that we talked about in revenue for waste tire, the 120 that we transfer out, that's for handling the tires. Basically, that pays wages, that pays for the machines and stuff that are moving the tires around and that kind of thing. The $210,000 is what we pay CRM to haul the tires up to Phoenix. So it's mostly trucking, and then they grind it up and then they sell it or whatever. They have their business, and so they deal with it after we're done with it. But that is state funded. Operating expenses here, this is the solid waste operations. As you can see, one of our major cost centers is wages, $2.87 million. That does include EREs. Fleet charges are the $2 million there. That includes fuel and replacement. Professional services at $75,000. That's any time we have to have somebody come out and do something for us, of course. The solid waste fees from the state at $155,000, and the transfers to other funds is the 1.06. The 1.06 is the $900,000 to cell development that we talked about, and then $208,000 or $206,000 for landfill closure. We do again have a contingency in that line. I was under the impression when we went through the operating expenses that the Board of Supervisors may have a question about some of our office equipment leases or data processing equipment and things like that.
Yeah, so what's coming up on the, what I'm finding on everybody's budget is there's all these, and it's categorized this way. The budget folks have created this category that they roll up all of the licenses for software and subscriptions to entities like the Association of Counties or whatever. It gets rolled up into that line. So there's a lot of stuff jammed under that category. So I was just trying to get a feel for some of them are. I'm worried. My concern is some of them are overlapping or redundant. That's all. I mean, they may not be. It just seems that everybody's got like a couple $100,000 worth of these subscriptions and leases, and God, it's in the millions for the whole county.
So in solid waste, there's not a whole lot that's expensive. We get into fleet and stuff, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. In solid waste, we have operating leases for our printer. I think most every department has that at $3,000. Data processing equipment. And that's in the solid waste world, we have these printers at each one of our scale houses.
You know, the
And-
ticket printers.
Yeah, and IT buys that stuff, but we reimburse IT, so we budget $2,000 to buy printers at the transfer stations. And then we also have a miscellaneous operating leases, which I know a lot of people don't understand what that is. That's our most expensive one. But what that is that's porta pot stand back because our rural sites don't really have any facilities. And so we want to make sure our residents and our employees have a place to use the restroom if they're out there. Because some of these people, they're running the transfer station all day and there's no place for them to go. So we do rent porta pots at those sites. And then we also have a land lease in San Simon for one of our transfer stations with the state. So that would be one of them as well.
Natural lease.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep.
How much is that?
I want to say that one is, I don't know an exact figure, but I think it's around $10,000 or $15,000.
And I just added up.
It may not be that much.
Hmm.
I remember it's fairly cheap actually.
There's what's the reason for that? I mean, is it the only one around that you have that you can put this? There's no other.
So what it is it's an old landfill, but it's an old landfill that was back in the day when people were just throwing their trash in a hole. And so the land can't be used for much of anything. You know, when you look at the dirt, it's reflective. It has glass in it and things like that. And so the state can't do much with it. We don't have any property out there as a county in that little area.
That's what I was
So,
getting at. Yeah.
so
there's
we
nothing-
lease this piece to run our transfer station.
No, it's 2,400.
Yeah, it's cheap. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
just
most
2400.
of that line we use 25,000 is probably for our stand back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of covers solid waste. Solid waste is super fun. It's an enterprise fund, like I said, so we have a lot of fun discussing it. It's a business within the
Garbage.
Yeah. We always joke about we walk into the transfer station and I always joke with the guys, it smells like money here, you know, but it really is fun to manage that for the residents and make sure that they're getting the best value they can for what we're providing. So,
Their bottom line for budget requests is zero, no change.
We're going to change that though. For the whole department, not the solid waste guys, unfortunately. Sorry about that, solid waste guys. I'm talking about the paving the road guys.
And we'll get into light fleet,
Yeah.
which we've already, so my pleasure, or my, part of my fun with doing these other divisions is, we're going to get into light fleet here, which we had some contingency monies in light fleet where highway has contributed replacement money. And we'll get into that where we saved them about $1 million for the year. We talked about it a little bit on Monday when we went through the highways budget. That $1 million got put into professional services and road materials. So we'll be able to do a little bit more roads probably this year, whether we do them or not, because we have the money in professional services to hire somebody out if we can. And we can also stockpile material like we talked about on Monday.
What's your capacity to stockpile fuel and oil products like asphalt?
Oh, yeah. That's a good point, right? To buy the market for fuel, buy the market for asphalt, and then store it. I mean, do you have the ability to do that?
Probably on a monthly basis for
No,
fuel.
that's-
Our reserves, our tanks are set up to where everybody in the county pulls from those tanks. We don't have a reserve to hold those, so probably a month or two, I mean,
Who's your buyer?
who do we buy from?
No, who in your agency buys the fuel, does the actual,
So procurement does,
so it's not you, it's the county?
the county does it.
Do we have people that know how to market buy fuel?
We have buyers.
But they watch the market, they just don't pick up the phone?
Well, we have contracts too.
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
we're contracted with the company right now, Synergy, I believe it's Synergy. And so they come out and fuel our tanks. They're under state contract. And typically our fuel prices are quite a bit cheaper than like something you can buy at the pump. We
Yeah, because it doesn't have the
discount.
tax on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we do pay some tax on our fuel. Yeah,
Do we?
Yeah.
We pay the earth tax and the
we do.
federal transportation tax?
Yeah.
So the 30, we're paying 36 cents a gallon for that tax?
And our diesel is not.
I
red
thought we
diesel.
were tax exempt.
So, and we're also not using red diesel in our off-highway stuff, so we're paying tax on that too. And the reason being is we use, again, those cells that we fuel our vehicles with are going on in licensed vehicles and in equipment, so we wouldn't want to fix that up with something that hits the highway. So we'll dive into revenues. Light fleet operations is 3.7 million. Fleet management charges 3.5 million. Light fleet capitals at 2.5 million. And
So what's that revenue source? That's the general fund?
no. So that would be, so the revenue sources for that is highways and solid waste. And some of that could be general fund, obviously, like the sheriff's department and things like that. So,
So it's the other departments
Mhm.
that pay for their vehicles.
right.
This is the separate side.
Do you see that expense in the budgets? This is the revenue side.
Mhm.
Yeah, I gotta sit down with you and I know this is good. I like it because it's broken out in detail, but we gotta do a roll up here so I can see what exactly, because we're moving money around and I'm not getting a grasp on.
Are we talking about fleet management charges? In
Yeah, because
general?
everybody's got it in their budget, right? Which is great. So I can see how much the sheriff's department spends, how much the probation department spends, how much on fleet charges, right? Because it's in there, fleet charges. But then there's got to be some sort of net roll-up cost impact where, to the general fund. So what is the total fleet charge? What is, and then we could break it out by underneath there by agency or department. Mr. Crosby.
Yeah, another category like that, which Mr. Fazio mentioned a minute ago, was solid waste department reimburses IT for electronic stuff. So that's probably not as big.
Yeah, and that's it's same thing with the subscriptions and leases, same things with all the other miscellaneous charges that you broke out, which is great, like I said, because that's very helpful to see. Now I know where everybody's spending the money, but now I want to just see how that total racks up and then come back and talk to you about where we can shave some off on this stuff.
Well, it's just all the one department it's reimbursing another. It's pretty confusing.
Yeah.
Like the warrants and demands that we look at every couple of weeks.
When it comes to this, though, some of the things, I know there's some expenses that go. I'll give so the sheriff's listen. This isn't directed at him, but let's just say it's just because he's got his pictures up on the screen right there. So those vehicles, right? You pay for the vehicle, and then we were talking yesterday. And you got to send it to somebody to rip the back seats out, put the plastic, drunk seats in the back. You got to put a shield to separate the cop from the guy in the back seat. You got to put cameras in there. You got to put weapons mounts. You got to put radios. You got to put lights on. You got to go get it painted or wrapped. Is that a wrap or a paint job?
So we actually decal those.
Oh, those are wraps or
Yeah,
decals,
they're
right?
stickers, yeah.
Yeah, and then you got the nice little. I've seen the trays in the back with all the stuff in the back. All that costs money to go do that. So the question is the utilization. This is just a question for the sheriff, but I mean, the utilization of those. Is there a way maybe not to have like a mix of it where not every vehicle's got all the bells and whistles in it? It's just like for lieutenants and above can drive one with just a decal and maybe a weapon mount and a radio.
So the sheriff's department does do that.
Oh, they do that.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right.
They're actually very good about that. If they have a deputy or somebody that's not going to be utilizing some of those functions, when we do an upfit on a vehicle, they will delete some of those things out of there.
Okay.
So that they don't have the extra, so they would gain extra room. Maybe that person needs to carry paperwork or something versus, a dog or whatever. Yeah, we upfit the vehicle, pretty much specialize each one for them. Now there's some that are just patrol vehicles. They all look pretty much the same. We generally keep those as close to the same as possible. That drives the cost down of an upfit.
Right.
Because we're buying a bunch of stuff in bulk.
How much do you reuse? Pull out of old vehicles and switch it to...
It depends very much because the body styles change and things like that. There may be years where we can go in and we can pull everything out and use it in another vehicle 5 years later. And 5 years later, sometimes these vehicles are completely obsolete. Everything
Yeah,
inside
the
is
Chevy
changed.
changes the
Yes.
trim package.
We do save things like the radios. We reuse cages if we can and things like that that are similar, you know. We do the best we can to make, you know, depending also, I might add too, because some of these vehicles get recycled into a swing vehicle.
At some point in time, Sierra Vista was doing the upfits for the sheriff's office, weren't they?
We had a company that was stationing in Sierra Vista and Tucson that was doing upfits, and they currently brought back the last vehicle. What was the name of that company? The Specialist.
Oh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Specialist.
That Sierra Vista, that government is not doing upfits for the county.
Oh, no, Sierra Vista itself is not doing upfits. We're doing upfits in-house. We have farmed some of it out because we do get behind and it starts to look like a Chevrolet dealership over here. And we're trying to move some of those vehicles out. We've got 25, I think we're sending out for auction right now. We did change up the auctions just a little bit based on a conversation that you and I had about not having too many Tahoes in one, making sure advertisement was done, things like that. So we've changed a couple of things.
Do you see any change in the?
Not yet. The auction hasn't.
Oh, it hasn't.
I think it starts on May 15th.
So
or
what that
12th.
is what I've noticed doing this myself is when there's a lot of the same thing on there, the first one and the last one tend to sell for very high prices, but everything in the middle low balls. So what happens is the first vehicle comes up and then everybody starts bidding on the first vehicle, and everybody that wants a Tahoe bids on that first vehicle, and then one of the guys will get it, the guy that really wanted it, who jacked the price up. There's always one crazy guy that doesn't calculate. Actually, I can't imagine how much shock they get when they get the bill after the buyer's fees and everything else and the sales tax. But anyways, and then after that, you watch the next subsequent vehicles go down, 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 down. And everybody now is saying, oh man, that guy overpaid. I'm not paying. But there's like 8 vehicles. So let's see what the next one goes for. And then that one goes down. And let's see what the next one. And then the last vehicle, because now everybody that's left is like, oh crap, this is the last vehicle. Then that last vehicle price goes for a little bit higher because everybody wants, because I need the vehicle. So now I got to ramp the price up. But what happens is if you have a lot on there, the ones in the middle sell for a lot less. Mm-hmm. And so that's just from my experience.
Downhill curve.
Yeah, yeah. So if you only have like 2 or 3 vehicles on there, then you have 2 or 3 guys that really want to buy a Tahoe. They need to buy a Tahoe. Then they'll fight amongst themselves, and that generally generates a better bump. You know, so a lot of vehicles on there at one time tends to dilute the urgency pool that's out there trying to buy a vehicle. So you tap into the guys that need the vehicle. And other things I've seen with other equipment that gets sold on these Ritchie Brothers. And
we're trying a couple of different strategies based on our conversation.
Yeah.
You'd said a couple of things that got my attention. So we advertised a little bit better this time. And we did mix up the way we did this. And all the auctions should be ending about the same time. So there's not one that ends 5 hours after the first one or whatever.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So expenses and light fleet, obviously wages is one of our major cost centers, $700.
Is that the maintenance guys that repair and maintain the vehicles?
Yes.
$700K?
Mm-hmm. And we actually have a pretty good system as far as you're supposed to have X amount of employees for X amount of vehicles. And right now we're riding a little on the low side, but we're keeping up. So we don't want to, the next guy, if we were to hire, would actually put us a little over that number. So we're trying to ride out where we're at. You know, you're supposed to have one mechanic for every 55 vehicles or whatever it is. And so we're right there at like one mechanic for every 57 vehicles currently, I think. So.
And procurement buys the vehicles for you?
Well, technically, Joe Hutchison, the superintendent for fleet, he's actually the one that goes out to talk to dealerships and gets the bids and prices and POs and does all of that.
Mainly from Arizona dealers you buy?
Yes.
So it's with the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department has a liaison that comes in and talks to Joe and I and basically tells us what they need. Their needs aren't always met. You know, we have to do what we can within our budget, and we have some replacement vehicles that are expiring from them, and so we're replacing them. They'll touch base on whether they can use a truck versus a Tahoe or whatever when we replace it, because trucks are a little cheaper than a Tahoe.
We're tax exempt, right? When we buy, we pay the sales tax when we buy vehicles too?
We pay sales tax.
Aren't we tax exempt for anything?
No.
Why do we pay taxes on taxes? That just doesn't make sense.
We need the revenue.
But it's revenue on top of revenue. And then there's overhead costs with that are being generated. You would save a ton of money. Oh, there's another one. I got to go.
There's legislation, yeah.
I was going to say, this is more of a legislation thing.
No, it is. It is. I got a running list of statutory changes I got to ask Gallen and Griffin and Diaz for next year. So this is
The chairman has talked about selling vehicles, excess vehicles. I'm more inclined to mothball them. So what do you think?
When you say mothball, you're talking about storing them and keeping them, using them for other things?
Yeah.
We do that
Put
a
them in the
lot.
bank. Okay.
We do that a lot. And that's one of the reasons Joe and I talked about using an underutilized vehicle report, which I'm working on building right now. It's a lot of fun. I'll come to you guys at some point in a work session. We can really dig into the weeds on that. But what I'm finding a lot of is any vehicles that are used less than 5,000 or 2,000 miles, and not in all cases, so don't get me wrong, but a lot of them that are under 5,000, 2,000 miles are repurposed vehicles. So these are vehicles the sheriff's department has worn out, or highways, and maybe it has a fuel cell in the back. So we send it over to the transfer station so those guys can use that truck to fuel their skid steer loader now without solid waste having to go out and buy a new truck.
You don't have to put insurance on it?
We do because
So
it
you
does
do-
hit the road to fill the tank in the bed.
Okay. Oh,
And I think ASIP requires us to have insurance on all our vehicles anyway.
so you're still paying the full cost on it.
We're not, because we're not paying replacement cost on that. We're only paying fuel and maintenance. That vehicle's already been replaced. So then that vehicle goes, say, to solid waste. We let adult probation do this, and juvenile probation, and solid waste, and all these different entities are using these vehicles. So they're not getting 5,000, 10,000 miles on them, but that's good, right? Because now we have vehicles that have already been used. Going to your point, we're not going out and buying new vehicles that are only going to drive 2,000 miles a year. We're going to give somebody a used vehicle that's good because it's not leaving the county. It's not going over 8,000 miles a year. It's a really good way to, utilize the last few years of that vehicle. The transfer station's a really good one to use for an example because Robert has 5 transfer stations. These guys used to have to take gas cans down to the Circle K or the nearest fuel site, get fuel in these cans and go out and fill their skid steer. They're spilling fuel. They can't keep up. They have to leave the station unmanned or low.
So you throw a tank in the back and
Yep, it's an old highways truck, and we park it there. So it only has 2,000 miles a year, to your point, but that's cheap hours, cheap miles on that vehicle, considering our lost opportunity when that guy went to go get fuel with gas cans. Now we can man that station with less people because nobody has to leave. They're there all the time, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So we have underutilized, but a lot of them are, like you said, they're basically hand-me-downs.
Is cannibalizing too labor intensive?
Cannibalizing is very labor intensive. We have done it on occasion. Typically, that's more done in the heavy fleet side because parts and components are so much more expensive and sometimes
and harder to get. Yeah. That's
Yep.
Then you want to touch on the maintenance or the replacement cost on that fund, how that works.
As far as,
Basically, we build the departments to collect funds to replace a vehicle when it
yes.
gets out there.
So, yeah.
And what mileage is,
So basically, all the county vehicles right now are getting charged a replacement fund if it's a replacement vehicle. We have some grants out there that don't have replacement on them. So when those grants go away, technically that vehicle's supposed to go away. But a lot of our vehicles have replacement on them. Most of the counties, about 17 cents a mile. That is not an accurate charge. We should be charging more. We're budgeted the amount we need to recover to buy that new vehicle, but we're going to be adjusting that here shortly because what we've looked at recently is vehicles have gone up in price. So when we're collecting 17 cents a mile, it won't even buy us a new sedan over the 160,000 miles or whatever it is we want to push that vehicle out to be. So we're going to have to adjust that. It's probably going to be somewhere in the 22 or 24 cent range for a sedan. These Tahoes, when we buy those are $60,000 vehicles. they get a $15,000 upfit, so it turns into a $75,000 vehicle. So if you do the math on that, if you sell the old Tahoe for $5,000 and it goes towards the purchase of the new one, and you do the math on the 160,000 miles that we're trading these out with the sheriff's department, we really should be collecting closer to 45 cents or 44 cents a mile, somewhere in there. That's something we're working on right now, that we can make sure that that gets reflected in the budget. We won't have to increase our budget, but we may have to show a truer cost.
The guy's already at $4 million in fleet costs.
Replacement costs, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then you bump him up, and then he's going to have a huge.
Some of that's fuel
We're-
too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Some of that's fuel.
And we're not talking about increasing the budget here. We're just talking about making sure that we have accurate numbers on what.
I got you. But I was just saying that when I'm looking at the numbers, right? And he's got his fleet the way that Stacy's got it broken out. It's got his fleet costs in there that he pays you basically.
Who's that?
The sheriff,
Okay.
right? It's like 3.7 something million, I think it was, if I recall.
2.386.
You got it.
I got a question for Stacy.
That's just the one line, but that other line might have been.
So replacement is 462,000.
Yeah, 400 something for replacement vehicles, but the fleet cost was what blew me out of the water. It was like almost $4 million for.
But keep in mind, those fleet costs have fuel in them too. So it's.
No, it's fine. I got you. I got you. I know that. I'm just saying that was just a astonishing for his department.
But because the Tahoes are charged a higher
Mhm.
percent per mile.
Yeah.
Right.
Per mile.
And that's what goes into that.
Yes.
Because probation's also using replacement.
Replacement, yes. So, well, they're using vehicles that are hand-me-downs,
Yeah.
so they don't have to pay replacement. So they're already paying a lower cost.
That's a pretty significant part of their budget.
It is.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
huge.
Fleet is always a major cost center with, well, in our,
Mostly gas, right? So
Mhm.
diesel,
Yeah, they're going up.
gas, fuel.
Around the county.
Mhm.
I have a question. Let's talk about lease versus buy, a depreciation advantage for accounting. And what does that have to do with an expenditure limit for the county as a whole?
Okay, I can look into exemptions and see if there's any there.
Or just like,
Yeah, generally leasing
I
something
would-
generally
I would-
beneficial to the dealer
Yeah, I don't know.
more than it is to the.
we've looked at,
Look at like enterprise.
in fact, we had Enterprise down here and we did do an analysis with them. And what we've kind of come up with is right now we're doing it cheaper than they can do it for us. They can show us on paper kind of how we can do it. They can do it cheaper, but it really
Dave
doesn't,
Ramsey, man.
it doesn't,
Dumbest thing you could do is lease a vehicle.
yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't math.
yeah, it doesn't
So,
matter. It's a
The other
dumbest
thing is if you do a part of it, and actually the sheriff's department just asked me to look into one of these things because, they're optimistic that there could be a way to look and get their charges down.
I'm glad people are looking at that.
Yeah.
That's good that they're doing that, but yeah, generally leasing works out only one way.
Yep.
That's usually.
they make a profit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And basically we're paying the depreciation is the biggest thing I found in my
And
study.
that's what it
That's
should be.
kind of what I'm getting at, but I
Yeah.
couldn't remember it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
My
getting,
days on the city council.
yeah.
Why are they leasing this, but they're buying that in depreciation? And what does that do to the, it might not have been called an expenditure limit, but it had to do with the overall accounting and our assets versus liabilities.
Yeah, the only benefit for leases is if it's something that's based on time. That's the only time you make money is if you're only going to have it for like a year or two.
Or if you have a small fleet and you don't want
Yeah.
to hire mechanics.
But what he's doing with we have the vehicles for 180,000 miles, which is probably 7 or 8 years, right? And then you're handing it off to another department and they got it for another 3 or 4 years. There's no model there.
Right.
For the lease. It's usually like I'll give you an example. I lease sometimes test equipment, right? So there's all these companies that really lease all this electronic test equipment. If I go to them, if I only need a part or a certain piece of test equipment for like a 3-month project, I'll probably go lease it. Because if I go buy it, it's like $300,000 to go buy it. But if I'm going to use it for 5 years, I'm going to go buy it. Because if I had to lease that thing for 5 years, I would end up paying twice as much for what it is. Yeah. So it's better to mostly, but you got to look at it. Yeah. Right. Like I said, there's some like you guys probably need once in a while to go rent a truck. right? You know, for something or
Mm,
something.
not very often.
Not very
We're
often.
pretty solid. We have rented, but
U-Hauls or, U-Hauls or, you know, enterprise, but there's sometimes where short term, it works short term. It really works. It does not work long term. If you're going to keep that vehicle for more than 3 years, buy it.
yeah. And one of the interesting things I seen with the one that the sheriff's department just brought to me, which was fantastic actually, but on the surface, again, we're paying their depreciation with the biggest.
Plus you're giving them profit, right? Their
Yes.
depreciation plus profit. And that's where they make their money. They got to make money.
One of the biggest things, though, it would do to fleet is we have a business model in the county, right? So we have our own mechanics already. So we have sunk costs. So what that would do if we took some of those vehicles away from them, it changes that 57 per mechanic to 40. And we have people there that can do the work now that are not doing the work. Okay. So what it does per unit is it drives the cost up for us. We're actually paying more per unit than we would if we had more vehicles. It's actually cheaper the more vehicles we had.
Well, that's the kind of stuff that I was wondering about.
Economy of scale.
Yep. All right. I think I got sidetracked a little.
No. It's very educational.
Okay. The motor vehicle, light fleet capital. Okay, that's where we're at. This is one that I really wanted to talk about because I heard the sheriff's department mention this, and it's absolutely true. The sheriff's department got 10 grant vehicles. There's more grant vehicles than 10, but they did get 10 vehicles that equals probably close to $500,000 worth of vehicles on a grant that they're going to trade out each vehicle for what's currently a county replacement vehicle. So it's hitting 160,000 miles. We would normally get rid of that and buy a new vehicle. They bought 10. We're going to plug each one of those into 10. So we're going to be trading out 10 for 10. There's not going to be any kind of pause or anything, but basically we'll just continue the replacement on that new vehicle as if it was a county vehicle because we already owe them a vehicle for this. So we'll be switching it out vehicle for vehicle for those 10. It'll save the county $500,000 this year for those 10. Joe would have had to buy 20,
a total of 25.
a total of 25. And I think it's going to cut us down 10 vehicles that we would normally have to buy. So instead of spending $2 million, we're going to wind up spending 1.5. So it was a super good benefit to the county that they did this.
How about for damaged or wrecked vehicles? If you guys getting wrecks or the sheriff's getting wrecks, how many of those vehicles a year do you guys do? Or does ASIP pay us anything for that?
It comes out of our deductible.
Yeah, I think it depends too. Like some of those vehicles, we had one that was totaled. It was a grant vehicle. The money goes back to the grant, and there's some oddball stuff. And really, sometimes we may have 2 wrecked vehicles a year that are totaled, and some years we may not have any.
Yeah.
And we just have a bunch of little damages and things like that.
We've had some little damages.
Yeah.
So do you have a body guy in your?
No, we don't do body
your
work.
contract for that?
Yeah, and I actually have an expense line we can cover where I show where we do send some of that out. Yeah.
2 guys.
2 guys?
Isn't that the name of the company you use? Just right off
Yeah,
the
we
top?
do.
Those guys.
Those guys.
Yeah.
We've seen that on the demands. I'm sure.
Yeah, we've had them repaint vehicles and stuff like that for body damage.
Earl Scheib, man. Is
Yeah.
Earl Scheib around anymore?
We repurposed a vehicle for a constable, and we had the vehicle repainted because we didn't have a vehicle really to give them. And we got this constable, so we repurposed the vehicle. We took it up there and had them paint it so it looks nice, and it had fairly low miles, so they're out there driving that.
Buena High School doesn't have a VOTEC paint and body department.
Cochise College does.
Cochise
I know-
College.
Again, like the superintendent alluded to, I don't know if we have to sign off on.
The
quality
vehicle's
of the
got
work.
160,000 miles on it. Who cares if the paint job is crap? You know?
Frank's.
If my truck's got 160,000 miles on it, I might, $2,000 get a full paint job from some high school kid. I'd pay $2,000.
Right. So basically, with that said, we've got that 2.5 million. We're only going to wind up spending 1.5 million. We are going to have a contingency there now because of those grant vehicles. It won't be huge, but we'll have some in there. We did have some other money set aside in there. Joe let me know that there's a compressor that could be failing at the fleet shop, so we budgeted, 20,000 in there for that. The rest of the contingencies really for emergencies, though. Do you guys have any questions on that slide?
How about, Frank, when you were looking at vehicles and the potential of selling, if not vehicles and equipment,
Yeah.
what were you thinking of and what kind of numbers were you looking?
Oh, I don't know what the numbers are. That's why I was talking to Joe and Jason was, and he's getting, you guys got software, I'm sure, that manages, the vehicle utilization. But if there's vehicles that are sitting for long periods of time that are underutilized, then, they should probably be sold, whether they're backhoes or dump trucks or whatever they are, right? So, I mean, there's something where they can, graders, I know you use a lot of, right? So those things don't sit, but I'm sure, I don't know what all he has.
We have an we have a program, like you said,
Yeah.
RTA, where we can run reports just to give us an idea.
How many
of what's-
hours
Yes.
this grader has or whatever.
Sometimes there's a lot of red flags, though. We start looking into them deeper. And one of the things that I was going to do here, Joe and I have talked about underutilized vehicles. I'm going to have to reach out to department heads and see what some of these vehicles are being utilized for, because we do have vehicles that are only getting 2,000 miles a year.
That's what I'm
1,200
talking
miles
about,
a year.
stuff like that. Or they're just parked in the yard and they've been sitting there a long time.
Right. Now, they could be using them for stuff like we use at our transfer stations, and there may be total justification for having a vehicle like that on site. I know there's employees that don't want to use their personal vehicle for whatever reasons, and we've got to make deposits or, so bank runs or mail runs or things like that, I'm sure, that are out there. But we check with these departments. We might be able to give them hand-me-downs rather than newer vehicles and things like that, or recommend that they use our motor pool, so they're basically,
Drop it out and go.
yeah, they get
Do
with
it.
Cammy over here, and then they're borrowing a vehicle for the day or for a week or whatever it is. Those are all for short-term use, but they could utilize those vehicles.
How about like golf carts and ATVs?
We have a few. They're donated. I think we have some like mules.
I mean, just for like running around, right? So like if I wanted to jump in one and run over to, and the other end of the parking lot or
Yeah.
down here to the courthouse or whatever.
So the sheriff's department got us some from Davis Mountain. In fact, I think they use one as well. And what are those called?
Side by side.
Side by side.
ATVs.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. They're like little Kawasaki's, and
Yeah.
they check their perimeters. We use them at the landfill to pick up litter.
Yeah.
Instead of driving a truck.
Say I just want to run over to the courthouse or something, it's just parked outside, plugged in somewhere, and you just jump in, just drive down there. I mean, the speed limit's only 45 miles an hour.
I don't know if they were making up that
No. So I got them in my other job. We have lots of golf carts. And running from building to building to building to building, it's nice. Just jump in the golf cart and it's like use it when it's like nobody owns them. They just parked, and if you come out, you got to take one.
Some scooters.
Yeah, but some of the golf carts fly.
The ones we have are called Gators, and
Yeah, gators.
the guys use them to pick up trash.
Yeah,
And
I got one on the farm.
Yeah, one of the things we gotta watch out on there is liability for
Yeah.
those ones that fly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're electric too. They're electric. You pull them in, you plug it in, and then you go in the building, and then somebody else will take it. But they're usually just plugged in. But they're so handy to have. And they're such a time saver. So instead of taking 20 minutes to walk from one building to the other, I can get there in 2 minutes if I just jump in the electric cart and go zipping over. It's just. But for running around and trying to do things faster, like run it over the courthouse or up and down the hill
Mhm.
over there, just. And they're small. They're easy to find places to park. You can tuck them in all sorts of
I'm going to take a
places.
golf cart around the pit.
What's that?
Taking a golf cart around
The lavender pit.
the curve around the pit. I don't know. There's a lot of.
I get the liability piece too. And then there's always the other factor that you can't account for, and that's somebody climbing into
Yeah.
a golf cart where you don't have the protection you have in a regular
Right.
vehicle.
That's what I'm saying.
So, but I don't know. I just throw the stuff out there.
So you were asking about outside labor. So we have 100,000 in one of our lines for outside work, and what that is for towing, windshields, body work.
You don't have your own
Paint.
tow trucks?
We have a truck and a flatbed, but we typically don't
Really?
use that. We've got other things are better to do. We found that it's
No,
actually cheaper just.
Yeah, I was just curious. So I
Yeah.
thought you might have had a recovery vehicle to, with the sheriff's vehicles breaking down or
Yeah.
getting in accidents or something to go.
We found it's cheaper just to use towing service, really.
Those guys are like, what, $500 now?
It depends on what you're
Plus
towing.
miles, plus miles.
Because we don't have anything to tow our heavy equipment, our heavy trucks, which is what a lot of our breakdowns
So you
are.
call Barnett and
Yeah,
he comes on and grabs it?
yeah.
Wow, okay.
And then have a guy that's certified to run a tow truck on the payroll is a whole nother thing. Do we really need to have that guy on a payroll? He only gets used once a week or once every 3 weeks or something. Of course, that just depends on our breakdowns.
Gotcha.
I did make a note here on, we had talked about in the past, and it was mentioned to me that you guys, that the board may want me to mention, when we replace vehicles, we go to 160,000 with Sheriff's Department, we go to 180,000 with a lot of the other county. We do push them out to 200,000 as well. And the things we typically look at are safety, depreciation, maintenance costs, productivity loss, fuel efficiency, the image to the county, right?
Yeah.
And then employee retention and satisfaction. Nobody wants to be
Driving a
a
clunky car.
clunky car to Phoenix. So those are things.
But I mean, there's a, I do personal vehicle, right? So when I get to a point when I'm sinking a lot of money into keeping a car on the road, you get to that point where it's time to trade it in and go get another one, right? So, I mean, you're using some metric to measure that. Because if you may have a vehicle, like I had my previous F-350, I put 450,000 miles on that truck. It was a tank. It never hardly broke down. I mean, once in a while, other than tires and oil and transmission fluid and filters, that's about it I ever did on that truck. It lasted forever. And then I sold it to a guy, and he's still driving it. He's still driving that truck. And that was just one of those, it was a 2006 F-350, and it was just, I drove it over the Huachuca Mountains from Fort Huachuca all the way over the other side, that truck, and got stopped by the Border Patrol on the other side because they couldn't believe somebody drove over the mountain with a pickup truck.
Over
They
Dark
thought-
Canyon.
Yeah, I came on, I was out deer hunting over there. But I mean, sometimes you get a vehicle that lasts, it's just that vehicle lasts forever. And then sometimes you kind of get a vehicle that seems like it's always getting fixed. It's kind of weird, but it's just the way they were built and, certain combination of parts don't mesh up right. So you got to have a way to get rid of that vehicle if it's a money pit, if it's a lemon, right? And then you got to, some vehicles may go 200, 300, like I did 450,000 miles on one truck, so I had it for like 15, 16 years. And that's driving back to Texas all the time, hauling stuff. And that truck was awesome. It just got to the point where it was an old ratty truck now, and I want to go get a new truck. So it served its purpose. But I mean, I get that. I understand that. But there's got to be some way to measure that. But I'm assuming you have that.
We have a lot of information. We break it down constantly into different spreadsheets and bar graphs and everything
Yeah.
else just to kind of play with that.
And sometimes it's just like your fleet guy going, it's not for a new truck, right? I mean, or you could say, well, I think we can get another 25,000 miles out of this one before we have to, but it's different for each vehicle. I mean, there's no, well, what I'm getting at is this 160,000 is not a set
The reason we do that with the sheriff's department is because they're
reliability.
pursuit vehicles.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to ever extend beyond that for them. But, when we pull that pursuit vehicle out of a service at 160,000, you bet there's places we could put that.
Yeah.
And again, if we were leasing, we wouldn't be able to do that. It would pull that opportunity away from us. So that vehicle might go to juvenile probation or.
How long does it take it to put that on there? How many years does he get to 160,000?
It depends on the department or the person running that vehicle.
Does he have a plan within his department to rotate vehicles to make sure? So if you got a deputy at Wilcox, who I'm sure puts a lot more mileage on than a deputy in Sierra Vista, let's just say, right? So do they rotate those vehicles?
That I couldn't tell you. We let them assign the vehicles
I
to
got, yeah, I got that, but I mean, you don't have any knowledge of whether they try to spread so they're not always replacing the same vehicle every 2 years. I'm just getting it.
Yeah.
You don't know?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, I was just curious. That's maybe a question.
It's something we could bring up to
Sure.
John at some point and just kind of see if.
Just out of curiosity again, because there's a cost savings there because certain things wear out just from time, not from use, right? So like hoses and belts and stuff, right? So if you're rotating this vehicle out, and you're getting a new vehicle every 2 years, you're basically taking it out of circulation when you could probably milk another 2 or 3 years out of another vehicle that's not being utilized as much.
And I get what you're saying. You're saying then you could leave it in that department who's invested in that vehicle.
Yeah.
Because we're reutilizing it, but we're utilizing it in another department.
But he's optimizing, the 160,000, so they're all at the same condition. So you're not turning in a vehicle that's only been out there for 2 years with 160,000 miles versus a vehicle that's been out there for 6 years or 8 years that is now a lot different condition because it's been in the hot Arizona sun, for 6 years, and the interior is all cracked. It's all because but it finally hits 160. This one's almost like brand new. It hits 160,000 miles, right? That's what I'm getting at. It's like trying to
Right. So you're aware, Robert's done that. We've done that in the heavy fleet side of things.
Yeah.
Because we've got trucks that run from the landfill to Douglas or the landfill to Wilcox, and those trucks will gain a lot of miles real quick. And once those start getting a little bit of miles on, we keep them closer to home. So maybe that truck's one that goes to Sierra Vista.
And guys like
We
trucks.
switch that truck over.
So he's always grabbing the same, because that's his truck, his favorite truck. So it's always the same guy driving the same truck or whatever. And so Yeah.
But we don't manage that part for the sheriff's department.
No, I got that, but I'm just saying, I can imagine geographically there are deputies that put a ton of mileage on. So that truck, even though it's got 160,000 miles on, looks brand new. Right? And then another guy has that same truck and he takes 6, 7, 8 years to put that same mileage on. So the cost is going to be different for the both of those. I'm just saying. It's just
That's an interesting point.
it's nickel and dime, I know, but sometimes nickel and dimes add up.
Yeah. Was on the light fleet side of things, was there any more questions? I had a mileage per department sheet here that I had put together. We're in the middle of building basically the underutilized vehicle information spreadsheets and things. Yeah, we can share. Yeah, sure. We can pass it around if you want. I will probably be reaching out to the department heads for vehicles that are utilized less than 2,000 miles a year, and finding out if those vehicles are absolutely necessary. And a lot of them, like I said, can probably be justified just because of the way they utilize that vehicle. Some of them may not be. I know we have a couple of departments that said they were going to turn in vehicles this year because they had underutilized vehicles and they were aware of it.
So Sharon, what's the reimbursement cost for personal mileage if people just use their personal vehicle and
The IRS mileage rate, 64 cents a mile.
That's
Right.
it's 64 cents a month?
So,
I mean, we have that ability, right? Where somebody can just come to you or turn in a sheet and say, hey, I took my personal car, because that.
right. So our vehicle use policy is we want employees to use county vehicles from a liability standpoint on county time.
In
but
case they wreck while they're on official duty.
On the
Right.
clock.
Right. But if they say are going to Phoenix and they know they're going to be they want to take the family with them because they're going to stay longer and, do other things in Phoenix or whatever.
Like Jason was talking about, somebody runs to the bank.
Yeah.
And drops off, they run out to the bank, give them 64 cents a mile.
So it's 70 cents this year.
Or 70 cents.
70 cents.
70 cents a month, right? So, I mean, if they're just going to run somebody's just doing errands.
Right. We try to discourage use of personal vehicles
Really?
for county business.
But
so that we don't
I'm
have to do
asking
that
why,
kind of
though?
mileage.
Why is, other than the liability thing, why?
That's mostly the liability
So
thing.
where's the justification for that? Do you have like a lot of people getting in car accidents and
No.
stuff while they're driving their personal
So I
vehicles
know
to the bank?
something came up a while back, and we had a guy that would run to the bank for us at solid waste.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
on his motorcycle.
Mhm.
And
So
that brought some red
bank
flags,
is-
just because it may be, I'm a motorcycle rider myself, but, it could be that, people are on their cell phones more nowadays, and we feel like maybe it's just not as safe as being in a vehicle. And we don't want, is he on the clock? Is he off the clock while he's
He's
riding
making
his
a
bike?
killing at 70 cents a mile on a
Right.
motorcycle.
Well, we weren't paying him for his
It's not
drive
quite
either.
that expression. Liability.
He was actually clocked out. We weren't paying for his drive time. He didn't want paid reimbursed for that
He just-
because he was on his way home. So when he stopped at the bank, he would clock back in and do his bank thing and then clock back out. But it did bring some very good discussion, and we decided to have someone else do it and just do it in a county vehicle. So
Just what's the optics of it too, you know, people run into the bank.
Mhm.
Mhm. We get a lot of.
I mean, the optics for me, the optics for me is when I go to Safeway in Wilcox and I see two county vehicles in the Safeway parking lot. That's the optics for me.
Mhm.
You know, not the optics that some guy took his personal car and ran to the bank, you know.
so they were buying lunch.
Yeah, no, I got you. I mean, well, I used to, I'm not going to say, but there's somebody else I used to see all the time parking in all sorts of places, and I used to question that part. But that's what I would rather, to me, optics is,
And the
if he
lights.
takes his personal vehicle and he goes to the bank and you see guy, you won't know, right? It's his personal vehicle sitting in the parking lot, or,
I know, but then they're carrying county funds in their
Mhm.
personal vehicle.
but they're still accountable for the funds. Whether they're driving his car or your car, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
Everybody knows he's got that money.
I mean, I think we don't want people getting into accidents in their personal vehicle.
So we do try to shy away from that. I think it does actually happen,
Oh, I'm sure. Mhm.
but yeah, but we do try to shy away from it.
I see it in everybody's, there's a 2,000, 2,800, 1,800 for personal vehicle investment in everybody's budget.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, so somebody's still,
Like I said, people go to trainings or
Yeah.
Sonic Phoenix and they just feel more comfortable taking their personal vehicle and
but I mean,
wanna be
what
able to
I'm
run
looking at
around.
is it cheaper just to pay them the 70 cents a mile rather than to have a vehicle that, and I'm just looking at the sheet, right?
Mhm.
So you got some of these guys that you can barely see the blue line.
We have had some people that say they won't do that. They won't take their personal vehicle, even if they get reimbursed. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, they do
And
refuse.
that-
Well, that's fine. I mean, but if they're willing to, let them do it. I'm just saying, if they don't want to do it and they want to go draw a vehicle out of the motor pool and take that, that's fine. But I mean, if they're willing to just on their way home, do an errand for the county and, you know, bill them the mileage rather than taking a county vehicle. I mean, I don't know, you said the cost is just for the replacement vehicle is 40 something cents a mile, you said?
So for most of the county, the replacement is only 17 right now.
No, but what is it really? You said it was like 40 something.
That's it's in the 23-cent range for a regular vehicle. The Tahoes were the ones, the sheriff's department, Tahoes with up.
So
to
160,000
45.
times 23 cents equals a new vehicle? Is that what you're telling me?
No, because those vehicles change out at 180.
180, okay,
So,
180 times
yes.
equals a new vehicle.
Yes.
And then there's maintenance costs.
Yes.
And fuel costs. So what,
And
do
maybe-
you know what the per mile cost is for each county vehicle?
They're all different, but yes, we can run a report and find that. I mean, it's easy to run a report and do that. You just subtract the fuel from it or subtract the maintenance from it or whatever. You can, obviously there's a chemistry to it, but we basically run a report saying, here's the total cost, then you delete whatever it is you want to delete out of that, whether it be fuel or mileage, or you add back in something and you can figure out any of those things.
Okay.
But really, they do get charged pretty much through costs. We don't find ourselves with a bunch of contingency. In the past, I know Fleet had some contingency buildups, and we do try to spend that down now if we have a huge contingency. This year, we have a contingency in Fleet because the sheriff's department basically went out and got $500,000 worth of vehicles that Fleet doesn't have to buy now. So that'll get basically postponed to the, next year or whatever for the next 10 vehicles or 5 vehicles or whatever it is. So, yeah.
What's a future, there's also uncertain all this grant money that's coming down now. I have a funny feeling we're going to be seeing a lot less of it here pretty soon.
Yeah.
So milk it while you can.
Okay. Well, that's what we have for light fleet, so we can dive into heavy fleet if you guys are ready.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So the revenues here on heavy fleet, usage charges are 1.1, diesel's 550,000. Heavy fleet capital on solid waste is 325. This 325,000 is something that solid waste contributes to fleet every year. Basically, that's a savings account that fleet holds that money. They're entrusted with that money to buy equipment and things for solid waste. Okay. Highways has that same thing. So if you go down highways fleet operations, the usage charges are 1.2, decent's 550 as well. Heavy fleet capital, if you notice here, we have replacement charges are 0. Going back to what I was talking about, light fleet, we don't want to have a bunch of contingency in there. We found contingency in the highways line for their replacement of like 1.5. I know we're trying to get more money to highways, so we reversed that contingency. So basically that 1.1 was moved from the contingency in the cash carry forward so we can use it on this fiscal year. So that 1.1 will be there, but basically it's on pause this year. Highways will go back to contributing their 1.1 next year.
It's on page 16.
So those are the revenues. The fun part, we'll get into the expenses. Heavy fleet operations for solid waste. Is
The sheriff had, I think, like $20,000 or something in his budget for heavy fleet. Does he have any heavy fleet?
they do.
What does he got?
They have a backhoe, and I think they have a grader. They have a forklift and some other stuff. They don't have a lot there.
Yeah,
They have a few
I just
things.
happened to, I was like, what the hell is the sheriff's using heavy fleet for?
I think they use it on their shooting range, maybe to pile dirt or.
I think they got a couple of vehicles from DRMO a few years back, like the
Yeah.
backhoe.
And it's just maintenance, that 20-something K is just them changing the oil and stuff on them?
Right. Oh, and we don't necessarily use that 20K. Yes, that 20K is tied up,
Yeah.
but that money's just set aside for maintenance or, that kind of thing for that
Yeah.
piece of equipment or those
Okay.
pieces.
All right. I was just,
So heavy fleet operations, solid waste, wages, obviously a major cost center. EREs is 323,000. Fuel, oil, and lubricants. These are barrels of oil and stuff like that that sit out there for the solid waste trucks to change the oils and maybe hydraulic oils and stuff that go to the transfer station.
you told me before you analyze oil before you change it, right?
We do.
Yeah. Do we have our own lab or you send it somewhere?
We send it off.
Yeah, that's right.
It's actually it's a state contract deal we have with Empire, and they send us the prepaid envelope and everything, and all we have to do is put the oil in the container, seal it up, and send it back, and they analyze it. And it's all inclusive in one cost, I believe. Diesel, 550,000. Tires, we had to make to 105. Tires are getting a little more expensive than they used to be. Motor vehicles, R&M. Now this is all the parts, the 350,000. Fleet charges, this would be charges that fleet has to heavy for like the maintenance vehicles. So the trucks that are running around with the cranes on them and stuff like that. Professional services, this is anytime we have to send out a vehicle to be worked on by an outside entity. Currently we have newer vehicles that have emission stuff on them that fail. Our guys are learning it just as fast as they can, but sometimes that has to go to the dealer to be programmed. And there's some components on newer machines that when you change it, it's actually serial numbered. So when you put that in there, it has to be reprogrammed by a dealer. They hook a laptop.
John Deere is getting sued over that right now, like you would not believe, because that's what
They want you to go to the
Yep,
dealership.
yep. They won't release their proprietary software. They won't allow aftermarket parts, because if you buy an aftermarket part and you stick it in a John Deere, it throws a fault code and it won't let you.
Wow.
And they're doing that on purpose to get under
Generic record person.
right to repair whatever it is that they're trying to do. But CAT doesn't care. That's good. I'm glad you guys are using CAT.
Yeah, so that 200,000 is for exactly that, though. It's, when we have to farm out that equipment. We do it pretty much in-house because we've got some costs with our mechanics, so we really don't like sending it out, but it does sometimes where Joe may have heavy fleet guys that are just so backed up they can't do something to, and we may farm something out.
You have a mobile guy that, like when the tractor breaks down out in Turkey Creek somewhere, you have a guy that can run out there?
I think we have 5 or 6 mobile service trucks that can go out. So yeah, all of our guys are mobile as well. Heavy fleet capital, solid waste, machinery and equipment. The 240,000, there's so not road vehicles. We put 240,000 in there out of that budget to buy a walking floor trailer. These are trailers that unload trash. For Robert out at the landfill. A lot of our trailers are old and just totally worn out.
These are what, the hook lift?
No,
trailers?
that's a roll-off can. So this is a 40-foot box trailer basically on the back of our big rigs. You've seen them around. They're usually tan. We have some white ones. And they're 43 feet long, and they haul the trash from the transfer stations to the landfill. And they have a walking floor inside that walks the trash out of the back. You know,
Okay.
so our intentions are with this money is to purchase one of those. We did hide some money in here to rebuild a scraper engine. So we have a scraper that's it's over $1 million.
Is this at the landfill as well?
Yes, this is all solid waste we're doing. So
Yeah.
that scraper at the landfill, when we bought it years ago, was $500,000 or whatever. Nowadays they're 1.2 million. We try to push out the life on these vehicles and machines. So what we're doing is we're using this capital, and we basically budgeted that money to extend the life of that machine. So we're going to rebuild an engine on that scraper. The other thing we have on there is a high side trailer. That trailer is for Robert's crew to haul that metal we talked about up to Tucson. So we get that recyclable.
Is this the big high wall
Yeah.
flatbed?
Currently, we're using roll-off cans. We don't think we're getting as much productivity as we will with the high side
Get stuff
demolition
more.
trailer. Not just more, but right now what the guys have to do is they go to Tucson and they've got a trailer, a pup trailer. They have to unhook from the trailer. They have to take the can that's on the truck and go dump it. Then they got to come back and they have to take the can off the truck. And they have to go with the trailer and hook the can on the truck. And they got to go dump that. Then they got to redo everything. So we think we can get 2 loads a day. So we just think there's some real efficiencies that we can pick up on that, which would allow us to get more metal to Tucson more efficiently. As far as motor vehicles on the heavy side, we have a transport truck that is slated to be replaced in the solid waste side. And then we also budgeted for an in-frame on a roll-off truck. And what that is, if you're not familiar, is basically an overhaul on an engine in one of those trucks, again, to extend the life. So we'll be doing POs for those. And we also budgeted for a roll-off truck, another roll-off truck.
The scraper engine, while it's deadline, do you have another scraper?
We do. Thanks to the Sheriff's Department, they got us one from, it was either Luke's or from Davis Mountain a few years ago. And it was one of those, it actually, I think it technically belongs to the Sheriff's Department, but they got it through solid waste to utilize for hauling material while our scraper is down, because it does go down from time to time. And to stay in compliance, we have to have that dirt to cover the trash. So it was a real benefit to us. And we have had, that machine's actually up and running right now, currently. But Joe wanted to budget that because we did have to do an engine on it this past year, which we did budget for, because we were pretty sure with the hours on it, it was going to go. So we're just doing it for the other engine. This machine has an engine in the front and the rear. It has a push and a pull.
Is it electric diesel or what?
No, it's diesel.
Okay, so
Yep.
it's got a transmission.
Yeah. Front, rear tranny, front and rear engine. Yeah.
So going back to the question on the sheriff, they also have the Bearcat for heavy fleet and incident command center.
Oh, the Bearcat, the SWAT vehicle?
Yes.
Is considered heavy fleet?
The big one,
What is it, over 10,000 pounds? Is that the number that makes it heavy fleet?
It's 26,000.
So that thing weighs 26,000 pounds?
It's all steel.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's also the GBW, right? Anything that's GBW, 26,000. So it may not weigh that. It may be 20.
It has the capability of
capable.
carrying.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Wow. So that's your numbers. Anything over the commercial driver level is heavy fleet.
Yeah.
CDL required to drive.
All right. So moving on to heavy fleet operations highways. So this is all of the expenses that would be to highways for this. So the wages over there is $461,394. That includes EREs. Fuel, oil, and lubricants are $75,000. You'll notice that they're lower than solid waste. The reason that is because we have transfer stations in solid waste that use hydraulic oil, lots of hydraulic oil. And so the oils are typically higher over there just because we use so much more.
Do you have a lot of leaks? Why do you use so much?
So when you change the oil on a transfer station, you're typically changing 110 gallons of oil. There's nothing that exists in highways that takes more than probably 15 or 20 gallons. So it's a huge difference. And
It's just for presses or something. hydraulic presses.
The compactors and the stations that pack the trash, yeah. And so the other thing would be obviously the compactor out at the landfill and the scrapers and stuff using a lot of hydraulic oil. And we do get leaks from time to time too. We blow cylinders, and when we blow a cylinder, we'll lose a drum of oil just from a hose blowing or something because they're downstairs and the guys can't see it. They just know it stops working. Yeah. All right, diesel's about the same. You're at 550,000. Tires at 110,000. Motor vehicles R&M. Again, this is parts. 450,000. The parts are a little bit higher, depending if you look from department to department, just because there's more heavy equipment in one department than the other. If you're comparing solid waste to highways, things like that. Professional services there on that.
Plus you got specialized equipment, right? Like you got
Yes.
a chip
spreaders.
spreader and other weird stuff.
Yep. Oh, we do have some professional services. Again, that's outside labor where we have to farm stuff out. It doesn't happen quite as often in highways. They have less over-the-road trucks and things like that. So those are typically what we see farmed out. We do have a small contingency.
And they're all heavily utilized.
Yes.
Constantly using them.
Mr. Fossey, at one time, I think that you had a striping truck that was used, and you were proud of the way that you were able to get more life out of that, or you bought a used.
Painting lines.
Yeah. So what happened was, well, the current paint striper that we had a couple of years ago, and you were here and voted it to allow us to buy the new one, in fact, which was technically used but refurbished.
Okay.
So we saved about $250,000 buying a refurbished one that's covered under warranty. So there was no reason for us to not try that. The guys really like the truck. It's a little smaller, so it doesn't hold quite as much paint, but it's doing a great job out there. So yeah, but to your point, we were very happy to get that machine because we had this older machine that was pretty well taken care of over the years, but it was aged. There was a lot of new components and stuff that were on the new one as far as
How
tires.
about leasing to like cities and stuff, like in an IGA?
We do that.
Make a little money on that? You do that.
Mhm. I think we budgeted, it's not very high, but it's around 100,000. This year we dropped it because we didn't do a lot last year. It depends on what the cities are requesting.
Yeah.
We get up for striping and stuff in Bisbee, Douglas, Wilcox sometimes. We do have some contingency in that, but it's very small. It's only 71,000. The operating and lease stuff, we do have the RTA in that heavy fleet, which is our software management. And then again, with the office equipment, it's just the printers. All right, the heavy fleet capital for highways, we got 1.9. Machinery and equipment, and this is anything that's not a road vehicle, we're going to spend $930,000 this year. What we did was we set money aside for a chip spreader, a new chip spreader, because we had a lot of breakdowns last year, and it really created a lot of problems for Fred's crews getting the 70 miles that we want to do every year. So we're looking at buying one of those. That'll be $530,000.
What does that look like?
The chip spreader?
Does it look like one of the paving machines where you just
Yeah.
dump in it and it kind of just spreads just like an asphalt machine does?
Yeah.
It just drops the chip instead of asphalt, same thing.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
I got it.
So we have dump trucks that back up to it,
Right.
and they hook, and then the machine moves with the dump truck, pulling it along and dropping the chip. The boot truck, what they call the oil truck, is out front spraying the road before the chip hits it. So, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned these pieces that we're planning on buying. We do have a road grader slated for replacement. Motor vehicles that would be considered licensed vehicles, which is a different fund line. We slated $200,000 for a dump truck. That's it. And highways, heavy fleet.
What kind of dump truck is that? Is that one of those real big ones? Like a
Are we super?
28 ton or?
Yeah, there's either a Super 16 or we can get a 10. I think in this case, for this amount of money, we're looking at a Super 16.
Yeah. So that's the larger truck, so we can get more material hauled at one shot. Yeah.
What kind of mileage do those things get?
I can give you a guess.
Like 3 gallons to the mile?
About probably
4 to 5 miles.
Joe's right on. So I ran an analysis on this not long ago, and most of our trucks, our big trucks that are hitting the highway with license plates on them, they're typically somewhere from 4. We do have some that get 3 that run the divide and stuff that haul trash out of Bisbee. Because they're pulling that hill. And then they're pulling another hill as they get to the landfill. So I think that's why they're lower. So we do see into the 3s at times, but it's typically around 4 to 5. Wow. Trucking costs are huge for public works.
RVs barely get 6 or 8.
Yeah.
That's on a good day. Yeah.
What about your truck? What kind of mileage you get on the big Ford?
I've got modifications on that truck. And it gets pretty good. It's pretty good gas mileage. It's about 15. I get about 15, 16 miles to the gallon. When I'm towing my dump trailer and I got 5 tons of gravel coming out of Wilcox, it goes down to about 11. You know, when I'm hauling gravel. But yeah, that's when I drove in the military. A lot of the vehicles that were armored and whatnot would only get about 3 or 4 miles to the gallon. So that's a common. And the M1 tank gets 4 gallons to the mile on a turbine. Yeah, it's a turbine. Yeah. So there's that ratio too. So
I have a boat that gets 1 mile to 1 gallon, so it's easy to keep track of
a boat.
what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're having a lot of fun.
No, I don't own it anymore. I had. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Anyway, that kind of covers what we were going to talk about today.
And I know you and Joe working on a whole bunch of stuff. You know, I appreciate that because especially the road thing about these. And again, we got to talk to Ms. Watkins as well about the different grades and, you know, A grade roads, too expensive. Let's have some B grade chip seal roads or engineered roads. There's got to be a way to
Find an engineer that doesn't have a license already.
I deal with engineers every day, and they are driven by the technical imperative, and it's in their genetics that they have to do it, you know, perfect. You know,
if you guys don't mind, I'd really like to ask my crew if they think I missed anything because
no.
I'm glad to hear from
is there anybody over there is there something that we missed? Because we covered a lot of stuff today, and this covers 3 different divisions. I know we're normally talking about 1.
Nothing that I'm aware of.
So you're the vehicle guy, right?
Yes, sir.
He's heavy fleet and light.
Heavy light fleet.
And light.
Tammy,
You're the business manager.
and Robert.
You're the paved and asphalt and chip seal guy, and you're the public waste or the waste
Solid waste.
solid waste guy.
My far right, what's your name again?
Robert Hill.
Robert. Okay, both names.
No, that's
No.
Fred. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I just wanted to make sure. And then again, to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this meeting, if there's a time or there's something you guys want to go over that's more specific to something, you could reach out to Joe or myself. We'd be happy to sit down and talk about it in more depth. We are going to continue working on some of the stuff we've discussed.
So I mean, I'm just Ms. Gomez too is probably talked to you. She's not here right now, but the road grading situation with these county maintained dirt roads. A lot of people don't know where the line is that ends county maintenance or what roads are county maintenance. I want to talk to you guys about doing building a pamphlet or something, an information pamphlet that we could put somewhere to show people this road, this road, this road, and this is how often it gets scheduled for grading, and then this road is not on the list, and this road is, something, because I am constantly fielding calls on, and I know I've learned from you, and I go look, and I could tell that is not a county road, or it's owned by the federal government, right? Or it's a Forest Service road, right? And they live in an isolated island, which I would love to own a piece of property surrounded by Forest Service land, but they have a house that's like up this road, and that road is not a county road, even though it ends at that line, like we were talking about Piney Road. And then the other one is Turkey Creek.
And there's a sign at like the end of Turkey Creek that's, and that states where it ends county maintenance, but our GIS site can identify whether.
So we do have, it's on our website too. So the county has a website that identifies that, but we could probably build a.
I mean, something so I could, like the folks in Machuca City, what's that one, the Baba McCarty guys, that are always crying about their roads and You know, they're,
So are you looking for something that's, I mean, I'm trying to imagine how to keep it simple.
so that I
and
could,
targeted.
so I can respond with a link in an email that goes to like a PDF or something that they can scroll through and it'll show them.
Yeah, right now, you guys,
It's about the scheduled maintenance that's a little,
The-
I can tell you whether it's a county road or not, but whether it's been maintained in the most.
Yeah, because really the best way to,
do, that's,
sorry,
I've seen like double folded and or triple fold pages that you passed.
No, I'm talking just a PDF so I don't have to print anything, just something that I could put a link on and we have it on the Public Works website too and people
From
can
time
find
to
it.
time, we have that visual presentation that shows, well, what's the schedule?
the Gantt chart. Oh,
the Gantt chart.
yeah.
The thing is we could look at
It's
building
more
something like
about the
that for you. We'll look into it.
I mean, just something to educate people on, you know.
What's really hard is sometimes, and it's going to happen to you, you're going to get calls, hey, they haven't been out here in 2 months. Sometimes we've been out there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Sometimes we haven't been out there in 2 months because we're out chip sealing now or something, and we did fall behind.
So like for Turkey Creek, right, they're big crying about the washboard out there, and they said that the Forest Service scraped off I'm getting some story that the Forest Service scraped the top thing off, and then it got lost, and then it turned back into this washboard, and you guys were hauling material in there to fix it, and then somebody screwed it up. I don't know.
So
I'm going to go out there and look at it.
just so you know, historically, Turkey Creek, the road is in the creek.
Yeah, and
So-
it's really soft. It's really sandy.
It's
right?
very unstable.
Yeah.
And, the bottom line is we try to talk to the residents about, we live in the snow and weather. Right now, we're going through a drought. That's
Right.
another thing that's
So it's
fighting
like- it's
Fred's
like a-
crew.
It's like a powder out there,
Yeah.
right?
We get powder holes and stuff.
Yeah.
And Fred's crew is just struggling like crazy because we haven't had any rain.
But that's why that's why I was grading with hard, dry roads or dusty, sandy, silty roads is got to be a pain in the rear end. But I mean, that's why we were talking, about roads like that. Is something maybe, what would it take to a grade B chip seal, on a road like that,
Or some sort of material on it.
Yeah.
Because there is other things we can put down like permazyme in case.
Yeah, like you and I talked like
Yes.
that stuff that you spray down and
Right.
roll it and it makes it hard. But
And we have used it in certain places. Certain places are really unstable, and you can even send a sample of the material to them, to the company, Permazyme, and they'll say, look, this is really unstable soil. You're probably having an issue right now where you blade it, and it actually makes the road worse 2 days later.
well, that's what they're saying. They said somebody bladed it and made it worse when they bladed it. And
It'll be beautiful for a few days,
yeah.
but we're so dry right now that it'll come back worse.
Hmm.
And we're trying to stay on schedule, but it's,
But that's my point, right? So that's what we're saying. If you're out, you're putting so much effort into these roads, right? What benefit can we get if we just bite the bullet and put something down there and make it a little bit more firm? But I guess if it's in the creek and there's washes and you're going to be peeling up chip seal when the water comes through, and I get that.
yeah, it all depends on the road.
Because you got to
Really does.
because then you got to put concrete or a culvert, right, to deal with the wash.
So we do have a rough draft of a list of roads.
Yeah.
That would be the top 20, to go down that path.
Yeah,
So we are working through that process and trying to figure out which ones would be the best ones to start to do that trial with.
It's still ridiculously expensive, even if you're going to.
I know.
replace it with
I know.
You
I
got,
know.
what do you call it? The big claw. They
It's
pull
that-
behind
that's-
the Caterpillar.
That's a,
You have to dig down.
the Title 28 stuff that I got to go talk to Gowan about with roads there, HERF formula. I mean, we really got to get that HERF formula changed to increase the mileage of maintained roads by county as well to, because it's not fair. Again, Maricopa County's got 4 million people and they've got roads that hundreds of thousands of people a day drive on those roads, right? They share the cost when they go buy gas. So that's why they get that. Now, we have roads that are important and they're rural, but we only have maybe like 4,000 people a day if we're lucky driving those roads. So the price of gas at 18 cents per mile with HERF revenue to support that road is significantly less. Even though the mileage is there, the ability to support that with HERF revenue is not. So they got to have a mile in that equation. They got to have a mile per road factor in those HERF equations because it's just screwing the rural counties royally. And, Maricopa County keeps building roads like crazy because they got all this extra HERF revenue. because of the population, the distribution by population is what's helping them. But we got lots of roads, but no people. So we get screwed on the HERF formula because they're not factoring in the road miles, maintained road miles.
From what I understand, doing some research a few years ago, one of the reasons they did that is because they didn't want counties just building roads and then all of a sudden they're on the hook for more miles. So that was part of.
I know
think,
that's
the
part.
reason.
I know that was part of the reason, but it's still. Yeah, I got you. We got to. They've got to come off of that.
Different formula.
They got to change the formula. It's just getting so disproportionately out of whack now with both Maricopa and Pima County that it's just got somebody's got to fix that.
Well, I
Because now
think
they're just building roads like crazy. When you're talking about they didn't want us building roads, just they're building roads like crazy everywhere because they get so much HERF revenue. They're constantly building roads, subdivision, new road, new highway, new expand, go 3-lane, 4-lane, 5-lane. You know, they're constantly doing that with their HERF revenue. And meanwhile, here we got guys like you. We're getting scraping roads, trying to keep the washboard off the road. That's all I'm saying. That's my fight. That's.
I appreciate you looking into that. I'm
Yeah.
sure engineering is probably feeling the same way. You know, at least you're looking into it and see
Yeah,
what,
and then-
what can be done.
I might need your help on coming up with suggested formula that we can ask to get put in Title 28, and, you know, and change Title 28 to allow for, it may not be much, but just something, you know, to say that there's a formula factor in there that says, you know, if you have X, and maybe we set a percentage, right? Where you say, okay, your mileage, your paved mile or your approved mile, chip seal mile road number is this. You're allowed to go 3% per year or 2% per year to expand your chip sealed roads or your paved roads, right? And then that is something that's restricted in there in that formula. You put to prevent what you're talking about, where we just start paving roads and then trying to get more HERF money.
Right.
But we have to build a formula that's reasonable that says, you know, we got to get some kind of an equation that includes maintained miles, road miles, and then growth over so much percent per year to allow that to be factored in. Somebody's got to come up with the algebra on that. So we got any good math guys?
We'll dive into it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we got our next meeting here. I see our facilities guys here nice and early.
Well, I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
He
was here early.
Able to get through all of that.
Yeah. All right. And then we're talking a lot. So it's not like we're not going to see or talk to you,
Yeah.
you know. So
Like I said, yeah, I'm available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right. So let's adjourn. The next meeting is going to be facilities. So we're adjourned.